this computer. Hi, my name's Steve Gaskin. I had the privilege of being a DCI in the Metropolitan Police Service, and certainly over the last 2 years at the beginning of lockdown, is we looked at what would be of interest to students, to members of the public, in terms of criminal and forensic psychology. And very recently, and it was very recently, we came up with this idea of why is it that when people commit homicides or murders, is they decide to place people or the corpse by dismembering them and putting them into a suitcase. You may think that is slightly bizarre, but what we'd like to do is to run through this with you and give you the opportunity of doing some investigation and commenting and talking to your colleagues, talking to your teachers, etc., etc. So what we're going to do is to start this very, very straightforward. You can see who I am, Steve. I was a DCI in the Met. I'm an advisor to quite a few TV programs now. I'm a university lecturer, and I also have the privilege of training direct entrant detectives, and I'm a criminal psychologist. So what is this all about? I need to tell you, first of all, for obvious legitimacy reasons, there's going to be reference made to killing. That's not surprising. Graphic description, that includes dismemberment. Just to let you know, there's not any graphic images of anything. And of course, I'll be talking about dismemberment. Bodies in suitcase. So these are your objectives, if you like. What is the scale of the problem? Why have I taken the time out to research this? Look at some theories. What is the scale of the problem? There was also a large experiment to try and control or look at with dismembered bodies, and pigs were used, just to let you know, is to see how long it took them to deteriorate. So you could then take the pigs experiment and try and relate them to humans. So as a former senior investigating officer, a former DCI, that would have been very useful to me. And then we're going to look at the principal question here is, why is it that killers use this particular method? And we're then going to have a look at some really cool case studies. And there's also a free takeaway video for you to look at. We worked with the now deceased, sadly, Robbie Coltrane, on a series with Sky TV called Critical Evidence. And there's some of the uncut videos there for you to have a look at, which was a body in a suitcase. So let's have a look at what is the scale of the problem. And you need to learn and realize straight away as psychologists, that's what we're good at, is measuring things. It's no good coming out with an expression saying crime is rampant in the United Kingdom if you can't prove it. It's actually the other way down. If you look at the way that crime is recorded, by any measure, crime is dropping, overall crime. So this type of crime is notoriously difficult to measure. And I'm going to, this video can be stopped and started. I'm going to ask you the question, why do you think that is? As a psychologist, as a criminologist, or as a forensic scientist, why do you think this type of crime is notoriously difficult to measure or tabulate? We are then going to look at Knopa and others in 2016. These were Polish social scientists, looked at 22 cases of dismemberment across 50 years in Poland. It's an excellent study. And I've scoured the net for you for particular cases. And there are at least 5 cases this year, I should say this year. By that, I mean 2022, otherwise that would be a terrible problem. And there is the reference there. It's very, very important if you're using someone else's material that is actually referenced. So that is the scale of the problem. Here are some recent cases, and I will give you the opportunity just to read through those, but you can see as late as November 2022. And most of these, if you want to delve further into them and pick up on these cases, they're very, very easy to find from the net. So you can see The last one in this country is the 19th of August. By that, I mean the United Kingdom. That was a guy called Thomas Nutt, and it was a case of domestic abuse, a very interesting case. And this crime was actually carried out, the murder, dismemberment, and then putting the victim into a suitcase was done on his wedding night. Yeah, so what do you make of that? And the motive on there you can see on the right-hand side, but there are other cases. So again, there's nothing stopping you further researching this particular topic. So what do you think? And this is really, really important. I'm interested in that. Your teachers are interested, and you should be interested, is before we look at the why, what is your notion? What is your theory? Why do you think suspects dismember bodies and put them into suitcases? So again, this would be a suitable place for you to stop and just reflect on that with maybe a partner or 3 or 4 people close to you in a classroom setting. So we're going to have a look at this video now. Can I just say you made some of this?
Police! Hello there.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, good. There's no answer. Sorry, what's your name?
Sorry, we were asleep.
Are you Gemma?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, Gemma. Just could you hold a second?
Sure, sure.
Come on a second.
Sorry, can I ask
Gemma, do you want to come out?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just want to see them.
Hand, just so your hands. Alright, Gemma, at this moment, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder. Okay, you don't have to say anything, but you may have a defence if you want to mention one question, something which you later rely in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence, okay? Once we're in the cuffs,
Am I allowed to...
I'll go explain everything to you. Okay?
Should I get some
Yeah,
shoes
sorry.
then?
What?
If you want
just
one
mum
sec.
inside?
Who's inside at the moment?
Mother.
Your mother? Okay.
Is it?
If you want to... Oh, can someone lift that up?
Yeah. Let's step back inside.
Is anyone else inside? Just your mum?
Yeah.
There is someone else inside,
No,
or just
that's
your
just
mum?
my mum, yeah.
Alright, do you want to... Should I bring her out, or...
Bring her in
Bring her?
for a minute.
Well,
yeah.
we're just going to come in for a sec, okay?
Sure.
And they've said that the person driving the Volvo waited in the car all that time with the windows down and the front door open, the passenger door open, when it was literally chucking it down with rain and it was windy. Why is that, Gemma?
No comment.
The car stank, didn't it, Gemma?
No comment.
Stunk of a dead person.
No comment.
Stunk of Deborah's decomposing body. Is that right, Gemma?
No comment.
Emergency. Hi, I just found a body. Oh, go ahead, caller. What's your emergency? I just found a body. Right, okay. A body, is it... Are they breathing? No, they're dead. They look like they've possibly been there like a few days or something, with some flies and stuff. Right, okay. Bear me a second. Let's pop this on. What's the road? Yeah, what road are you on? I'm in Salcombe. You're in Salcombe, sorry. Let me have a look. I can populate, hopefully, where you are. So, Bennett Road, are you quite near the harbour? We're up from North Sand Beach. Hang on, we'll just look at Google Maps. Oh, okay, yeah, so I can see North Sand Bay. Road. Bennett Road, yeah, you are on Bennett Road.
So you can see that's quite an interesting case for you to have a look at, and increasingly you can see there that the police service are having to rely more and more on CCTV footage, and that is a skill in itself. Just imagine having to trawl through maybe hundreds of hours of videotape with a view of finding, as we saw here, about 20 or 30 seconds of material that can be used. So this is a really interesting study, though. It's the world's largest study of bodies in the suitcase. And of course, as a scientist, I have some criticism around the methodology that was used for this, or the method. But you can see basically what's going on here now. Each of these suitcases represents a body. And this gruesome study is the world's largest study to try and help catch this sort of killer. And it wouldn't have been in the interests of the experimenters had there not been an incremental rise in this particular type of method of murdering someone. Almost 70 samples have been placed in cases and wheelie bins. You see them here in Bushland in Western Australia. So my first criticism is the deterioration or the decomposition of the flesh is going to be potentially a lot quicker in places like Australia, Thailand, and my criticism was that it had not been placed into some countries such as the United Kingdom. Anyway, the researchers got over that and they did exactly that. So you can see there that they've used piglets, and researchers measured the temperature, the humidity, the outside, as well as the insect species and their age, which, again, if you call a forensic entomologist along to a crime scene, they can help you out with the development of flies, maybe indicating when that body had been put there. So I bet you didn't think we were going to be looking at this sort of study when we started this very short session. What I want you to do now, this is really what psychologists, this brings us to the heart of bodies in a suitcase, and this is what psychologists are interested in, the why. The reason being is because if we understand the why, that can help us therapeutically in delivering a treatment to people that are suffering from mental illnesses. So psychologists and psychiatrists can help. So there is what I have defined as the 5 principal reasons. You can look at them, and I've just used a one word, and I'm going to expand on those. The first one is defensive. The second one is aggressive. The third one is offensive. The fourth one is psychotic. And the fifth one I've described as mafia type. So what I've done is I've trawled the internet and looked at these cases and tried to somewhat pigeonhole them into different reasons. So what I'd like you to do is just to reflect on those 5 reasons before I unpack them and get you to come up with a definition of what you think they might be. And of course, I'm asking quite a lot of you there. Number 4 is probably the easiest ones, but just have a look at those expressions. And again, in small groups or on your own, or however you're going to manage this, is to try and develop these topics, because it will start making you think about what I'm going to do next. So what does the research say? So the first one here is defensive. Is literally, the reason it's defensive is a defense mechanism by the person that is carrying out the murder to simply getting rid of the evidence. As we saw in that case earlier on, 2 suitcases there, and it can also, if the bodies are sawn up in some ways, it can make identification harder. One of the things that interests me, and I'm undertaking a course at the moment, is around forensic anthropology. In other words, looking at bodies, skeletons, everything that goes with that, and try and determine age, gender, ethnicity. So this is our first term, is defensive. The second one is aggressive. Usually it's done in a particular way. The person that committed the murder has done that in a very aggressive manner. So obviously very strong emotions, and there is usually an emotional motivation to carry out this sort of murder, such as torture. So moving on there, offensive. So the dismemberment is the real purpose of the murder. So they haven't thought, well, what I'll do is I'll shoot that person, stab them, use blunt force trauma. The whole idea of the purpose is the actual physical act of dismemberment, and that is why it is called offensive. And I apologize in some ways for putting this term in here, but there is, you can look this up, necro-sadistic murderers often will use this particular method where suitcases are involved. You then look on to psychotic, and you probably got that in the preamble there. This is where the suspect has lost touch with reality, maybe schizophrenic. And if you don't understand the term schizophrenic, you really do need to get a handle on that. In fact, last night in a pub, as it happens, I met someone that was schizophrenic. That doesn't mean to say they're going to carry out a murder. They just have to be handled in a particular way. And then the final one here is what I call a mafia type, is where the person that commits the murder is sending a very, very clear message to rivals, police informants, or to the police, leaving a clue, either over or quite subtle. But the reason why this person has been bumped off is because it's part of mafia or organised crime. Other research around this here, researchers found a very strong correlation or relationship between this type of concealment and suspects that had been sexually abused as a child. A very, very strong correlation. Surprisingly, there is no correlation whatsoever between anatomical skills such as butchery or medical skills. The exception to that particular rule and research is the one that you last saw, the person responsible for that murder. And it was like all murders, this was particularly upsetting. The suspect was a former medical student, and she befriended someone at her local Baptist church in order that she could defraud the woman out of her life savings. And there was a false will in that case. Other research, one of the leading lights, and this is Professor Helena, you can see there, Nyholm, a former criminal profiler with the Finnish police, and she sees this as a reflection of attention and sensation-seeking, grandiosity and narcissism, which again I'm going to touch on briefly towards the back end of this presentation. It is likely, she contends, that the suspects fantasize many times the reactions that the people will have that open the mail. In other words, the suitcase, what sort of reaction that will provoke. So just to make that crystal clear, the person that's committed the murder will fantasize about the person that actually opens up the suitcase. Rather bizarrely, you may think. She contends that the allegations over the filming of various aspects of recent crimes could serve the same purpose as sending the body parts to someone does. It supports the grandiose thoughts the killer has of themselves. So often they will video it. So this bit of research in itself is particularly good for a senior investigating officer, because I would make doubly sure that when we searched the area where the suspect either committed the offence or were found, is that you look on their phones or on the PC to see if they've taken any footage of this. In reality, the offender's self-image is often disturbed and negative, although they may appear to be self-confident. And killers were almost twice as likely to have been violent at school as other kinds of murderers. And there was a much higher likelihood of past contact with mental health services compared to other homicide offenders. 10 out of 14 offenders examined by the researcher had been in psychiatric inpatients, and that's not surprising, is it? Because I don't know about you, I would find it very difficult to even contemplate not only murdering someone, but after that is then dismembering the body and placing it into a suitcase. There has been significant increases in these offences in both Germany and Japan. What is this telling you about the personality of the offender? And of course, for me, one of my particular skills is offender profiling. So looking at the psychological markers at crime scenes as opposed to the physical evidence. This is really, really important to me. And if I was still a senior detective, just equally as important. So this is what it is telling you. This is one of the things here, and this is called the dark triad. And we could major in all three of these as discrete, separate subjects or lectures. I could talk to you about psychopathy for 3 to 4 hours. Psychopaths in business, are they born like it? Is it nature or nurture? Do people that are psychopaths necessarily go on to commit murders? You've then got narcissism, and that's people that effectively have fallen in love with themselves. And you can see the traits are using first-person pronouns, focus on themselves. And then when you look at Machiavellianism, that was after an Italian politician called Niccolo Machiavelli. And basically in his book, The Prince, he said that you should do everything possible to get to the top, including murder. So for me, there is often from the research, this is quite interesting, this dark triad, because it is 3 fairly dark sides of people. And when put together, forms a thing that a guy called Dr. Paulus first coined in 2002. So this dark triad is fairly new. And my suggestion is if you are at all interested in criminology and forensic psychology, that you look this up. How does it help offender profiling? More frequently, the motive behind dismembering a corpse is a more convenient removal of the victim's body. A murder completed with dismemberment, the body is most likely committed by a person related to or at least acquainted with the victim, which again gives the investigators a good starter. Nearly always dismemberment is done in the crime scene, which typically is in the flat of the victim, the perpetrator, or a shared premise. Typically, a murder completed with dismembering the body is not premeditated. That doesn't mean to say you can't charge with murder. I don't want this to turn into a law lecture, but again, you need to know the difference between murder and manslaughter, what needs to be proved. Severing the bones in the joints does not necessarily indicate the perpetrator's profession, as we said earlier on. And school and hospital records are hugely valuable as an investigative tool. So this just is something to think about. So if you were given more time or you were asked to research this subject, maybe this was given to you as a project by a teacher or a university lecturer, what would you want to discover in terms of? So this is something to really think about. Suspects, victim, crime scene, and method, modus operandi. In other words, how did they carry out this particular crime? So the last thing to say, and thank you so much for keeping up with this, is that if you go to this particular YouTube, this is something I promised you earlier on, there was a free takeaway, which is a absolutely stunning and brilliant investigation that I'm actually quite in awe of. So there is the material there for you to have a look at. And finally, thank you so much for listening as a teacher or a student. Really do enjoy psychology. It's a fascinating subject. Studying at university is so versatile. It should help you get into employment. So thank you so much once again for listening to this. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop sharing this and just say thank you so much for listening. My name is Steve Gaskin. I'm a director with the Crime Lab, which is thecrimelab.co.uk. do keep an eye on that, because we do have some really good events to follow. Some have to be paid for, but they're not hugely expensive, and some are completely free. So thanks once again for tuning in.